Okay, so today we're going to start talking a little bit about lists. Lists are also known as arrays in other coding languages, and they are extremely powerful. They are a way to store lots of pieces of information that are similar in some way. The list that we're going to deal with today is a list of names. So we've got some code here. Let's see what it does. When I have the green cat and I click on the green cat, it says, give me a name of someone in the room. And so I'll type in my name, Ricky, and it says, keep going, yes or no. So I have to decide whether I want to keep going, and I'm going to say yes. And so it asks, give me another list of someone in the room. And my dog is right here, so I'm going to put Scout. And keep going, yes or no. I'll go again. Let's see, my name, Andy. And keep going, I'm going to say no. So I'm going to stop now. And it says, hello, Ricky. Hello, Scout. Hello, Andy. Click to add more names. Okay, let's add one more name. How about Harry? Okay, keep going, yes or no. I'm going to say no. And now it's going to step through the list again, and it's going to tell me each of those names that are showing up on the list. And then I can continue. So you get a sense that when you look at the coding, there's loops involved here, a couple of them. One that is collecting the input, and then when it's done collecting the input, it's going to say back to me whatever it is that I found, and then will allow me to play the game again, basically. So, and we're going to be using new code that we haven't seen before, which allows us to use lists. So let's look inside and see what we got. Okay, so here we go. When the green flag is clicked, click me to start. So when this sprite is clicked, so when I click on the cat, it says continue to yes. Continue is what we call a flag. It's like keeping track of whether we're going to keep going or not. So right now we say continue to yes, and it's going to repeat whatever's inside here until continue is set equal to no. So somewhere else we're going to set continue to no, and then it's going to know to stop doing this. So give me a name of someone in the room and wait. Add answer to names. Notice the color of this code. It's not orange, it's kind of a burnt red. You're going to find that under the section that's called data. So here we have make a list, and you're going to get the list which is called names. And you'll see names are listed over here. So this is a new type of data form. When you click this list, you'll be able to create a new one. And then you get all these blocks that are associated with lists that allow you to manipulate the lists. And you're going to be playing around with what each of these does as part of your lab exercises. So let's go back to our code though. Add answer to name. So when I typed in Ricky, Ricky got added to names. And then it said ask, keep going, yes or no. If answer equals no, then set continue to no. In other words, turn the flag to no so that it will stop collecting names. And we'll only do that if the answer the person responds is no. So it'll keep going through this loop until I'm done entering names, and then once it's done, it's going to step to the next thing. It says set name index to 1. Now you'll notice that when you create a list, the index of the first value, which in this case was Ricky, was 1. So the indexes in Scratch start at the number 1. And I bring that up because in many coding languages they actually start at 0. But in this Scratch they start at 1. Okay, so repeat length of names. What do you think that is? Length of names. So that is probably going to have something to do with how many different items are stored in this list names. So I'm going to repeat, in this case, 4 times. And it's going to say hello, and then item name index of names. Okay, so list of names has 4 things. And we just want to say the first item. So name index is set to 1. So we're going to say basically, tell me the first item of names. And then we're going to change the name index by 1, and then we're going to say the second item, and then change this again and say the third item, and so forth. And names could be 10,000 things long, and it will just step through one at a time and say each name that is in that particular list. And then when it's done saying all of those things, it will say, click me to add more names. Press spacebar to clear everything. So if I click on the sprite, again, I'll be back here when this sprite is clicked. I can start adding names and it'll say yes or no. Or if I want to clear my list, I press spacebar. And over here you can see the code that does that. When spacebar is pressed, repeat length of names, delete the first item. So this will, it'll like go through and chew up the very first item. And then once it deletes the first item, the items below it will move up, and then it will delete the first item again, and they'll move up until eventually all the names will be deleted. There's actually another way to do that. If you put delete items 1, you can actually choose delete all. So that can be a chunk of code that will just quickly delete everything in your list without having to loop through it. So it's just good to know that that's a possibility. Okay, so that is kind of our first look at what you can do with lists. Now, in order to learn it, I would like you to open some code and remix it, and we're going to build it together. So if you go to your course calendar, just pause the video if you need to do that. Go to your course calendar, and you're going to find something here that says find the minimum remix, okay? And open up that Scratch code. And it should look something like this, okay? What you have is some code that's going to generate a great big list of numbers, and see the numbers are all over the place. In this case, the length of the list is 125, so if you scroll this down, now it's 0, but we're going to create another one. So I clicked on the sprite, and that generated a list. It's 85 numbers long with a whole bunch of random numbers in it. Now what I want to do is write some code that's going to allow me to find the minimum number in that list. I can scroll through the list and see, ooh, there's lots and lots and lots of numbers. What is the minimum number of that entire list? And I definitely don't want to do it by hand. So computers are wonderful to do something like this. So together we are going to code this task. So if you haven't already, go to the course calendar, open up this code, and then click Remix so that you can code with me. So then we're going to go inside. So pause the video until you're ready to go, and then we can code together. Okay, first of all, when I click the green flag, take a look at how I generated that list. First thing it's going to do is delete everything, and then it's going to say complete the code to find the minimum value, and then pick a random between 75 and 125. So this is going to pick a random number. It's going to repeat a random number of times, so between 75 and 125. In this case, you saw it went like 85 times. And then it's going to pick a random number between -1,000 and +1,000. And we're going to pick that number and add it to the number list. So this is a way to generate a bunch of random numbers and stick them into a list. So let's run the code. I click the green flag, complete the code, and it's now generating that list, and it's got 80 numbers long. So that's good. So we now got a list. Now what we want to do is write the code, and we're going to put it under this sprite that says find minimum. We want to write the code that will find the minimum value. So I'm going to walk you through exactly how to do this. So we'll do it together. Okay, first of all, this is a list with lots of different numbers. We only want to find one minimum value. So let's create a variable, and we're going to call it minimum. And we want to assign that value to whatever the minimum value is. And we're going to create some sort of a loop that's going to loop through the entire list and check to see if the number is the minimum. And we might make some mistakes along the way, and we'll debug it and figure it out as we go. So first thing we want to do whenever you have a variable is initialize it. So I'm going to say set minimum to. Now the question is, what do you want to set it to, right? Because if you set it to 0, there might be numbers that are smaller than it. There might be numbers that are bigger. Like, you don't want to accidentally miss a number. So I would probably make the minimum, I'd set it equal to the maximum possible value it could be, and then we'll change it as we go. So because my random numbers generated in here went from -1,000 to 1,000, I'm going to set the minimum at 1,000, and then I'm going to change it as we get into this block here. All right, so within the block, now we want to find the minimum. How are we going to do that? We're going to need some sort of a loop, and we're going to need to loop through this entire list. So let's get a loop. Which one do we want to do? We probably want to do a repeat until or repeat a certain number. And it turns out that this is probably going to be the most efficient way to do it. We're going to repeat it a certain number of times. How many times do we want to go through the list and check to see if we have a minimum value? Probably as many times as there are numbers in the list, which in this case is 80. So we have a code block for that, and it says length of number list. So I can repeat the length of this list, which in this case is going to be 80 numbers long. We're going to repeat this aspect. Now what do we want to do? We want to have our minimum value is 1,000, and we want to check to see if the current value, so value number 1, it's hard to see with that like this, value number 1 is -403. So we're going to say our current value of minimum is 1,000. We want to know, is this minimum value, is this less than this? And if it is, we want to replace minimum with this new value of the first index of this number list. That sounds kind of confusing, but let's give it a try, and I'll show you what I mean. So what we want to do is we want to have an if statement. And it's going to look something like this. If this first value here is less than the minimum that I've set, then we're going to have the minimum value be set to this first value. So let's try that. If this first value, okay, how can I specify the first value of the list? Well, let's see. Over here, the first value of the list is going to be if item number 1, we can't put it there, we got to have an operator. If item number 1 of the number list is less than the minimum value that we have as our variable, okay, this is going to be 1,000. If this is less than 1,000, then what are we going to do? We are going to set the minimum to be equal to this value. So let me make a copy of that. I'm going to set it equal to this, make it equal to this value. I'm going to make this smaller so you guys can see the code. Okay, so if this first number is less than my minimum value, then I want to set this to that, okay? And we want to repeat that as many times as we have numbers. So let's go ahead and let's see if this works. And we'll run it. And what do I get? I get negative 403. Okay, so it worked for the first number, but then it didn't check it didn't loop through the list. So how do I get it to loop through the list? I don't want to just keep checking this number 1 again and again. I want it to check the first one and then the second one and the third one. So what I need is another variable because I need that index to change. Like I can choose 1, or I could put a number in like I could choose 5, or I could choose 10. But I wanted to choose the first one and then the second one and the third one. So how can I do that? Well, I can do that by creating a new variable, and I'll call it index. And here's my index variable. And I'm going to start by setting my index to, at the very beginning of my code, I'm going to set it to 1 because the very first number in the list has an index value of 1. Can you see that? 1. So I want to start here, and then I want to go to 2, and then 3, and then 4. Okay, so set the index to 1. And instead of saying if item number 1 of number list is less than the minimum, I'm going to say if item with the index. So at first index is 1, but then it's going to be 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. And that way it's going to step through the list and set the minimum whenever it's the same. Oh, I've got to change it here too. So I've got to have set minimum to item sub index. So if the first number, if this number is less than the minimum, it's going to set minimum equal to that number. And if it goes to the next one and it's less than minimum, it's going to set the minimum equal to that number, etc. Now there's one more thing I have to do, which is I have to increment my index. In other words, first it's 1, but then I want it to be 2, and then 3, and then 4. Now, that means I want to change index by 1, but where do I want that code to go? Do I want it to go here? Do I want it to go after, or I'm inside the if? But it's only going to change it then if it actually was a minimum. So no, it's actually got to be out here. In other words, you want that if to evaluate, but then you want the change of the index to happen whether it was a minimum or not, because you still want to step through the entire list. Okay, I think this is going to work now. So let's give it a try. Find minimum. Boom. Can you see how it's working through the entire list? Set minimum to negative 999. So somewhere in that list, I don't know exactly where it is because I didn't actually keep track of the index. Somewhere in there is the number minus 999, and that is the minimum value. So it looks like the code worked. Let's run it one more time, just for fun. Complete the code, find the minimum value. We'll create a new list, and here's our new list. It's 122 items long. Let's find the minimum. Boom. It's stepping through, looking for the minimum. And minimum was in minus 1,000 this time. So we did get a different value. So it looks like that code is working. Okay? So that kind of concludes our little tutorial. What you're going to do is work on your lab. And your lab, oh, that's not it. That's the blocks lab. Is going to look like this. Now this is a little bit different lab because it only has one problem that you actually have to code, but it has a whole bunch of little exercises. So the best way to learn lists is just play with them. So what I want you to do is build your own list and then answer a bunch of questions and take snapshots of your code and then drop them into these little boxes like you've been doing before. Okay, so I've got a very specific task list for you. Once you complete that, then you're going to go ahead and answer this question. And then you're going to build this code that's called even or odd. And you're going to be building your own list, and you're going to be doing some tests of those lists, etc. So you should have enough information to get going. So good luck.